Siya po ang in charge ng sa Vatican, siya ang current secretary ng Pontifical Council for Social Communication, appointed by Pope Benedict XVI noong 2007 pa. At yung expertise niya at pinapangalagaan niya, lalo ngayon sa panahon natin, yung social media at saka mga social networks. No? So para makikita rin natin ngayon ang estado ng simbahan tungkol dyan, kung anong gustong gawin, pangkalahatan, hindi lang sa mga kasapi. No? So I just introduced you and said your expertise na social communication and mass media. At si Ariel po, ang kasama rin natin si Sky Ortigas, ang Pangulo ng Youth Pinoy, na sila po ang nag-organize ng Social Media Summit. Second na po ito. So last year we also had that. And Monsignor Tighe is the guest speaker. And he is also here, sinamantala na lahat-lahat. He will also be present to give a talk sa 50 years nung Intermirifica. Ito po yung kauna-unang dokumento ng Vatican II about social communication. Nagsimula nga yung term na social communication sa dokumentong Intermirifica. So, nung Vatican II pa po yan. Okay.
Siguro, konting ground rules, Father Francis. Ano ang pwede lang nating itanong na topic kay Monsignor?
Ang expertise ni Monsignor ay yung social communication mass media. Hindi lahat ng issues ay may katanong natin sa kanya kasi kadadating lang niya dito sa Pilipinas. But other questions siguro pwede hindi sa kanya diretso ay pwede natin sagutin after the forum. Okay, so si Ariel ang as usual ang mag-a-anchor ng ating forum.
Good morning, Monsignor. Opening statement po.
Okay, an opening statement which I have not prepared, but first and foremost just to say I'm very pleased to be here in the Philippines. I'm very happy to be here to speak at the summit that is coming up on Saturday, and also taking advantage of the time here to meet other people who are active in communications in the Philippines. Obviously, this is not an easy time to be here. This is a very sad and difficult time for your country. This trip was already organized and the events were organized, but I'm very conscious as I come here today, as different parts of the world, people are saying to me, where are you? I said, I'm on my way to Manila. And the first thing people are saying all over the world, believers and non-believers alike, is we are thinking of the Philippines. We're very conscious of the Philippines at this time. We want to express our sympathy, our support, our solidarity, but also I think we want to express our admiration for the spirit of the Filipino people. We've been watching on TV over the last few days, and we've been seeing the terrible devastation, the terrible things that can happen, but we've also been witnessing the extraordinary care, consideration, and generosity of your own people and your own resources. So I think we would want to make a vote of confidence in your ability as a people, of the people who have brought so much joy and good news to the whole of the world, that we pray for you at this time. We offer whatever support and assistance we can, but above all, we want to reassure you of our prayers that your spirit, your ability as people will be fully manifest at this time. So I think before we say anything about social media, we need to acknowledge the terrible suffering and to pray for that, and to say that I come here on behalf of the Vatican and the Vatican II. People there are very conscious, but not just in Rome, but in the church globally. There's a sense of solidarity and belonging with the Filipino people, and all over the world you have church communities are organizing various activities to see what support they can offer to your people at this difficult time, knowing also the history of generosity of the Filipino people in supporting others. So that's the first thing I want to say, and just be thinking very much of you at this time. The particular reasons I'm here is for a social media summit. And I would say that the church all over the world, in the Vatican and in all the local churches, is learning to be present in a very different media world. You are media experts. you're working in the media. You know how your world has been changed and turned upside down by the emergence of the new communications technologies. We're always interested, not so much in the technologies. You know, this is faster, cheaper, quicker than anything I could have had 30 years ago. But what's more important is the changes that are happening in the culture. When I see my nephews and nieces who are maybe aged around 20, their education is totally different to mine. Their way of expressing themselves is totally different. Their way of learning what's happening in the world, of forming their ideas, again, is totally changed. But even more simple things, how they form friendships, how they maintain friendships changed. The way they belong to communities, the type of communities they have, totally changed. And therefore for us in the church, because we are in the business, we're sent by Christ to be people who build community, we need to understand the changes so that we can be present effectively and supportively and helpfully in social media. In social media, there are two things. One, we are convinced that social media and the social networks have an enormous potential to be good for human beings in their totality. The social media allows to know one another, to learn things about each other, to understand each other, to communicate, and to have a world that is built on dialogue and friendship. But that won't happen automatically. That requires that those of us who are present in social media are there in a positive way. We're often conscious of the negative side of social media, the trolls, the abusive comments, the violence and the bullying and the harassment. But what we're saying is, let's change that by being present in a positive, life-giving way, in a way that is supportive of dialogue, of debate, and that recognizes the goodness of other human beings. Then for the church is saying the church also must be present in social media, because we must be present in all of the world. And social media is a hugely important part of the lives, not just of younger people, but especially of younger people who are spending more and more of their lives online. Therefore, it's an existential reality. It's a hugely significant part of who they are. And we want to see how the church can be present so that people who are present in social media can hear the good news of the gospel, can be supported and helped, can be offered the hand of friendship from the church. Okay, that's, I think, my opening statement.
What are the challenges does the church face in the digital age, especially among the youth?
I think the biggest thing for us as a church community is that because the culture of media has changed, we have had to learn a different way of communicating. Social media, everybody says, is interactive, it's participative, it's conversational. A lot of our training in the church was for the use of media for one-way communication. We now have to learn to be present in media in a more conversational and dialogical. We have to listen, we have to see and hear the questions people have to ask us, and we have to be willing to try and answer those questions. But I think that's why we say one of the amazing things was 50 years ago when the bishops of Vatican II were talking about communication. They did not talk about the means of communication. They spoke about social communication, because communication is always about two things. Communication is about sharing information, but communication is also about building relationships. And in social media, we have to have a way that the church is present, learning to, yes, share information, give knowledge, give our teachings, give our message, give our ideas, but more importantly, to form relationships, to listen to other people, to understand who they are, and to learn with them. Pope Francis spoke to our office about 2 months ago, and he said the key things Catholics must do in social media. were to listen, to converse, to have a conversation, and to encourage. So the key thing we must do in social media, there are many people present in social media, people who are looking for relationships, people who are looking for truth, people who are looking for a purpose in their lives. We have to listen to them, speak and talk with them, and encourage them on their journey of faith. And on their journey, even if they do not recognize faith, I think all people are searching for meaning, for connectivity, and for a purpose in life. So we journey with them with hope and try and share the good news that we are blessed to have.
In the olden times, the good news was shared by storytelling or lecturing, but now it's conversation. Are the priests ready for that?
I think, are the priests ready for that? The first thing is the church is not just the priests, and that we need to remember all the time, that the priests we're good and we're important, but we're not everything. But I think I would say the key thing for priests at this time is not that they have to be the ones in social media doing, but they have to encourage and form and help everybody to be present appropriately in social media. And then some priests will be good with Facebook, some won't. I think one thing we say is very often, in the last 50 to 100 years, the church has been very good at documents, letters, encyclicals, speeches. Our young people do not read long documents. They do not watch long discourses or listen to long discourses. We have to learn a simpler language, which is more direct. But that's very much part of our tradition. Before we were literate, we were able to tell the stories. We could use stained glass to show our stories. We learn, I think, a new medium which is more about showing and telling. At the Vatican, for example, we have a web portal called news.va. News.va, here we are. News.va, where we post every day all the news coming from the Vatican. We also have a Facebook presence where we post the same news. But in Facebook, it's the pictures, it's the images that people want to see. So we must show, not just tell, so that we learn the storytelling again. When people who are believers are present in social media, I don't think they should be saying hallelujah all the time or God is love, because I think this does not help. But it means that we need to be authentic. We need to be sophisticated. So if I'm in a conversation and somebody is raising difficulties or having a problem in their life, I shouldn't be afraid to say, I will pray for you, or I will be thinking of you, so that we witness to our faith in the way in which we try and support and encourage and help other people. Not that we are trying all the time to win or to bring people to us or to conquer numbers. It's more that we want to be present, supportive, and if the greatest joy I have in my life, if the greatest thing I have in my life is the gift of faith, is the blessedness of knowing that God is close to me and God loves me, then I should share that with others, because it's an important part of who I am. And if my presence in social media is to be authentic, then I must also express my faith in the appropriate way. Not simply, as Pope Benedict said, by quoting the Bible or adding Bible passages, but by being authentically present and supportive of the other person and helping them to search for truth, to find meaning.
I'm just personally curious about the involvement of the Pope in his Twitter account, Pontifex. I follow him on Twitter. So I just want to know, how does it happen? How does a tweet happen? From day to day, or he's very popular, he gets a lot of retweets. So we want to know, does he press the post button and all that, or is it just something that you organize?
Is he the one?
Yeah, just how involved is the Pope in his social media activity?
There was a group of people, there were lots of people involved in trying to develop the idea of having a papal account in Twitter, of having the Pontifex account. And we thought this through very carefully, because what we wanted to ensure was that whatever appears, that each tweet is authentically coming from the Pope. Okay, logistically, we could not say that the Pope each time is going to tweet for a number of reasons. One is, we wanted to have one computer from which we tweet, which has high security, so it cannot be easily hacked. The second thing is because the Pope is tweeting not just in one language, but in 9 different languages. So you couldn't have each tweet happening individually. But what we wanted to be very clear was that when the Pope was asked, Pope Benedict was asked to be present on Twitter, and it was explained to him exactly what Twitter is and how it works, his first reaction was, with small messages we can say a lot. Because our Bible, a lot of the most important things that Jesus said, love your neighbor, put yourself, choose those who give up their lives, find life. Most of the important biblical teachings fit in 140 characters. So, but what we wanted to say was that when the Pope was preparing a speech or preparing an intervention or wanted to say something about something that was topical, that when they were working on his speech or helping him to put his ideas on paper, somebody would also propose the tweet. And he would see that and he would say, yes, that's what I want to say, or no, this is not what I want to say, or I want to say it slightly differently. So that every tweet comes from the Pope's, has said, yes, that's what I want to say. Somebody else then takes it and translates it into the different languages, and somebody else sends it off automatically. But the reason why there are not so many is because we want to ensure it's authentic. And increasingly, if you will see very often, what the Pope's tweet is, it's the nucleus of a homily. It's the nucleus of a sermon. It's what he's going to say at the Angelus or at an audience. And so what we like to say is that every tweet is coming from the Pope. Not that he is tweeting it physically. The first one you will have seen Pope Benedict at an audience tweeted the first one, and he used my iPad. This is the iPad he used to send the first tweet. But since that, in fact, we've been using, as I say, he prepares, he gives the idea. So also even when the terrible disaster struck here in the Philippines, in the past, we would have sent a telegram to the head of state, and the Pope would have approved that. Now, as well as sending a telegram, the Pope says, I want to send a direct message myself to the people in the Philippines, but also to people in other parts of the world, saying, remember and pray for the Philippines at this time. So one thing that has become very interesting for us is things we never believed, is the numbers are very good. The other thing that is very reassuring is that the Pope being on Twitter has encouraged lots of other bishops, and the church is not just the bishops, but it's also encouraged lots of people who are already present in social media saying, yes, he's with us, we're not on our own any longer. And this has been very symbolically important. English, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, Arabic, Polish, and Latin. 9. For the moment, 9 languages.
Which language or languages are translated?
Usually it will be, the original tweet is prepared probably in Italian, and then, or in Spanish, and then translated into the other. And sometimes a tweet is sent only in one language because it is directed to a particular group of people.
Is it dangerous for the church? We will eradicate the middleman. I will no longer listen to Father Francis tweet and just follow directly the Pope.
We say that, okay, the Pope has over 10 million followers in Twitter, and this is very good. We're pleased about that, but it's not really about the Pope. It's about the message that he is sending. And the message that he is sending is always a message that is coming about the love of God for people, about the need for us to create a more just world. So it's about the message. It's about the message of Christ that the Pope is articulating in ways that more and more people are engaging with. When the Pope tweets, we know that 10 million people have chosen to receive that tweet, but each of them in turn has the possibility of retweeting. And this is where we're interested in. We are learning that the Pope has a very high level of retweeting for a public figure, which means that his message of hope, his message of the gospel, his message of encouragement, or at times his message challenging us, is reaching not just the 10 million people who have chosen to receive it, but those who get the retweets. And there we use the image. In the gospel, there is the story of the man who is spreading the seed. And you're throwing out the seed, and some of it falls on fertile ground, some of it is swallowed up, some gets caught in the weeds, some is never heard of again. And that is the way when we share God's word. We don't know who is receiving it. We don't know where it's going to impact on somebody's heart. But our belief is that the word of God is never without effect. So therefore, while the Twitter is a technical story, it's more importantly to see it as theologically, it's our effort to share the good news with as many people as possible. And this is a new way of reaching more and more people. The interesting thing then is people in social media react. And some people say lots of things in response to the Pope on Twitter. Some are positive, some are very negative. But our belief is by watching those, we learn. We learn why people are angry. We learn why people are confused. And maybe for the interactivity, we invite people in the church to respond, to engage those who have messages, to respond in the appropriate language, to respond in the appropriate culture, so that we have a church that is truly interactive in social media. Even though the Pope himself, his account, the Pope cannot see all the responses, the Pope cannot respond to all of them, although this Pope is very interactive with the telephone, as we know. And this Pope, but we, as a church, we will be interactive. We see what people are saying in social media. We understand what their concerns are. We see where their anger is coming from, and we try and respond and engage with them there.
The Council, the Pontifical Council on Social Communication, now owns the internet address .catholic. What's the purpose of this?
I don't know. I don't want to presume that people know. There is a group called ICANN. ICANN is the International Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. It really, in a sense, organizes the internet. It ensures that all the people who work on the internet are able to communicate with each other, so that the internet addresses, if I look for google.com, no matter where in the world I am brought to google.com. And what they have decided was, traditionally there are top-level domain names. That is the bit that comes after the dot. .com, .org, .net, or the geographical ones, .ph, .ie, .uk. And some years ago, ICANN decided they wanted to liberalize the internet, to allow what were called generic top-level domain names. This is technical, but I need to explain it. So, which meant you could put any string of characters. So I could have .poltai, if I was vain enough. Or I could have .motorcar, or .shop, or .museum. And they said we must have this liberalization. So you could have .Coca-Cola, .IBM. The Vatican suggested to them that they should not allow religious terms, because if you had .God or .Christ, who can claim? But they said, no, there is free speech, we must allow any string of letters, okay? So then we decided, if that was going to happen, it would be good for us to try and have .Catholic in the first place, so that nobody else will take it. But then secondly, for a very positive reason, if we have a .Catholic, the top level domain name, it will be theoretically in time possible to invite all Catholic organizations to use that top-level domain name. So people in the digital space, when they hit a website with .catholic, will know that it is run by an authentically Catholic institution. And that means I might stay there because I like that, or it also means I can go away because I don't like that. It is freedom. It is informing people, authenticating the Catholic presence in the internet. And our idea, our hope is that we will offer this .catholic at the second level to dioceses and to religious orders. So you could have Manila.Catholic, Cebu.Catholic, which would be the diocese. Or you could have Jesuits.Catholic or Carmelite.Catholic. And then they in turn will be able to offer it to juridical bodies, to a parish, to a school, to an institution that is recognized by the diocese. So you could have St. Mary's Parish .Manila.Catholic. And that means people will know that if they see this site, that it is genuinely and authentically a Catholic site. And that's, so for us, it's a way, if you think about, it's a way of having a space in the digital arena where the church can have an authentic presence. It's not means the only one, because individuals may have their own websites, which will not be .Catholic because it's not for individuals, it's for institutions. The other hope we have is that if we have all the major Catholic institutions using the one top-level domain name, then if you go with a search engine, if you go to Google or you go to Bing or you go to Yahoo and you search for something, say you search for Pope Francis, you're more likely to get a Catholic site. So this is what's called search engine optimization, and we believe it could help with that, and that's our hope. But so far we have got the approval from ICANN. We have gone through their process, and they have said, yes, we have the entitlement to .Catholic. The next stage is we have to go to delegation, which means they have to be sure that we have the technology that this will work properly, that we have the ability to make it work properly, and that we have the constituencies organized that will enable it to work effectively. And I think that will take another 1.5 to 2 years before it begins to be operative. But it's a long-term project that we're doing slowly, and that we're hoping in the long term will allow for the church to, one of the big concerns all of us had is the digital divide. There are people in parts of the world who are not in the digital world because they have difficulty of access. And this is a real scandal because it means they're excluded from a very important arena. And part of what we're hoping is that when we get the churches that are very developed in this area present, that they will help churches in other parts of the world that are not so developed to become more present in the digital space. So for us, it's also an exercise in church solidarity and community.
The theme for our media summit is the revolution. So we wanted to revolutionize the web here in the Philippines. So it was taken from the inspiration from the Evangelii Nuntiandi, the encyclical of Pope Paul VI, that the church would feel guilty if we don't use media for evangelization. So in a way, we would like to educate Catholics here in the Philippines and in Asia more about social media, on how we could evangelize more. And for this version 2, we're more on educating them, especially on how to battle the trolls, how to defend Christ in social media, because there's a lot of things that is happening in social media right now. Maraming nangyayari po, maraming mga, like example, for this Typhoon Yolanda, everything, mas napadali yung relief operations because of social media. Like our issues on the PDAF issues and all issues, mas napadali na ipalaganap yung issues because of social media. So us Catholics in social media, we are here to unite ourselves and be one as we evangelize, as we proclaim Christ in the digital world?
I was taught that spirituality's most important ingredients are silence and reflection. In the era of instant connectivity, I mean, what's the role of silence and reflection?
2 years ago, Pope Benedict had a message for World Communications Day, which was about silence. And people thought this was strange. Why talk about silence when we're talking about communication? But what that message, I think, is really saying is that we cannot have real communication without silence. Because we cannot have real communication without listening. And I cannot listen unless I am silent. Does that make sense to you? In Ireland, we have an expression, God gave us one mouth and 2 ears. We should be listening. And one of the things that we want to say is that in social media is extraordinary because it allows us to be connected to so many people, to engage with so many people. But if we don't have time for silence, then our connectivity will be quite superficial. So what we're trying to encourage people is to also cultivate the ability to listen in social media. Very often, sometimes if you go on social media or you go to a search engine and you ask a question. So if I'm coming to Manila, I ask a question, 10 things to see in Manila, and I put it into social media, into Google. The first thing I get will be lots of things selling me things to do in Manila. Does that make? There'll be hotels and restaurants and theme parks immediately trying to sell me something, okay? And that is, I think, when we're in social media, when somebody asks a question, we need to listen to understand their question, not to throw them an answer, not to sell them something, not to try and manipulate them immediately, but to actually understand the person and understand their question. So silence becomes absolutely important for good communication. But silence is also very important because it's in silence very often and in solitude, in aloneness, that we have space to hear God's word. So in all the different voices, in all the different sounds and the offerings that we find in social media, we need to discern. And that is where we need to keep the wisdom of silence and solitude so that we will be good and effective communicators. And one of the interesting things is silence and solitude does not necessarily mean switching off, because we will find on the web some wonderful resources, people who can help us to pray, people who will teach us to meditate, people who teach us how to read the scriptures in a meditative and reflective way. So if we think very traditionally, we recognize that human beings, our need for silence and our need for solitude. We're asking, in the digital world, we still need silence and solitude if we're going to really communicate and really think. Sometimes if I reply automatically, without thinking, without reflecting, then the communication gets bad. Or sometimes if you read something in social media and you are getting annoyed or angry, before replying, it is better to have a little silence, a little reflection, so that Sky mentioned trolls and the anger on the social media. We need to change that by not engaging at the same level, but by staying a little bit more calm, more peaceful, so that we try and ensure that social media allows for good communication and good conversation, which begins with listening. I would have to say is, I think at the local level in the church, I get to travel and see things that are happening in different parts of the world, and I think it's actually better than you might think. There are lots of good initiatives happening, and I come back to my point that what we would say when the bishops come to visit us in Rome, and they come to visit at ad limina visits, when the bishops from different parts of the world come to visit our office, we don't say to bishops, you must be in Twitter, or you must have a Facebook account. What we say is, in your diocese, you must have somebody who is thinking about this and doing this. So it's not so much even that it must always be the priest or it must always be the bishop, although that is important, but it's also that you encourage people, you help people to be present in a good way. One lesson recently, I was talking about new media, and somebody said to me, stop talking about new media. They said, it's okay for you are over 50, it's new for you. But this person said, for anybody under 30, it is not new media. It is everyday, normal, ordinary media, okay? When I go home, and I have this with me, my 7-year-old niece, Rachel, borrows this from me. She does not, this is not new media. This is, she plays games with it. She writes stories on it. She makes little videos with it. She takes pictures with it. This is absolutely normal every day. So it's not new media. What is new, however, is that the way in which communication happens. And one thing in 1970, Pope Paul VI said, how do we use media to evangelize? The question nowadays is slightly different, because we have to say media has created a new world, a different world. So we say, how will we evangelize in this new world? How will we be present in the digital arena? Because it's no longer technologies to use, but the technologies have created a web, a network, an environment, and we have to learn to be present in the best way. So again, when we're talking with priests and bishops, before saying do things, we say understand. Understand what is changing, and then at the level of your local community, encourage the young people, encourage the different people who are present to be present in ways that are effective, so that the model for social media is cooperation, working together. We try to avoid talking about real and virtual. It's not helpful, because what is digital can be very real. So when I find a message here from somebody, it's very real. But what we distinguish maybe between online and offline. And one of the things that strikes me is that the church's communication, digital communication, is like entry level. It's the beginning of a conversation. But the conversation will then extend to inviting people to a more full participation, because our gospel is always a gospel that invites people to service. Always a gospel that invites people to reach out to their neighbor. And we need to be sure that when we have engaged people with social media, we also invite them to join our community where we worship and celebrate the living presence of Christ among us. That we also invite people particularly to service. There's a friend of mine who works for an NGO, and they have a very good Facebook account. And she says, we have loads and loads of likes for our Facebook account in our NGO. But she says, a like is not a donation. That we also want people who will give, who will support us, who will be present, who will help us with the work. Does that make... I think similarly, one thing that with young people in particular is, with Facebook, I can have 1,000 friends in Facebook. But if in my life I have 2 or 3 real friends, that will be a great blessing in my life. So some of the things we need to do are also to enable people to understand that where I think social media is very good, because it shows people want connection, want relationship. But we need to show them where that deeper relationship comes in a good friendship with another human person, which takes time, which is not as easy as just switching on my computer, which means maybe sometimes being close to a person when it's difficult, and that brings us then to the fullness of communication, which is that it's in God that I will find true communication and true friendship. So it's about taking seriously social media, working with social media, but inviting people to the deeper needs of the human heart as well, in and through social media.
If you have like do's and don'ts for like us Filipinos on social media, how best we can like contribute to the super typhoon victims, and maybe like how not to aggravate the situation, because emotions are really running high like now on all our Facebook feeds, like everything is about it. So maybe just, I know maybe you haven't really thought about it, but from the top of your head, maybe you could give us some pointers, like the typhoon situation and relief, and there's like conflict with the government and sides and whatever. I mean, maybe you could give us some pointers since this is your expertise.
I think the first thing, not just Catholics or believers, but everybody who has really goodwill, and we want to believe that in social media, most people, I believe, are in their heart good. There is a desire for goodness. Most people, when they see the terrible suffering that is happening in your country at this moment, their first instinct is they want to help, they want to be supportive. I think my first do for social media is try always and appeal to what is good and noble in the other person. Does that make sense? It's easy sometimes to condemn, to criticize, but sometimes that does not really help the person to escape. So my invitation would be to say, no matter how angry we get, how cross we get, how upset we get, or how difficult the conversation is, we should try and say, I will try and raise this conversation. I will try and appeal to what is good in the other person. I will try and believe that it is possible to communicate with somebody who has different views. So that we always try, and if people have, one of my worries is that if social media is very negative and it's very cross and very angry, and people who are good and sensitive will say, I won't go there, then it leaves it as an open arena for the trolls and for the difficult people. So I would say the really challenging thing is to learn to be present in a positive way that tries to understand the goodness or the nobility in the other person, even when we are in disagreement. One thing that I think is important is if we have concerns, if we are afraid that bad things are happening, if we are afraid that there will be injustices, we should never be afraid to name the injustice, to speak out against what is wrong, but we always do so in love. We speak the truth in love. So I think the theme I would try and take is, even though at times I have to say this is wrong, I can say this is wrong, but I am not judging other people. It's easy at a distance sometimes to have all the answers. So I would say we try, and also if I see somebody doing something wrong and I say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, that makes it difficult for them to listen to me because their first reaction is to defend themselves. So we try and fight a way, say, look, could it not be better? Would it not be more helpful? So we try and find a more positive approach to the problems we see together. I think as we see something like the difficulties people are facing in the devastated areas, they're having to make very hard decisions. We hope and pray they are making those decisions for the best motives. They may sometimes get things wrong, and we need to say, maybe you could do better. But we try and support and encourage what is good, what is generous, I think at the heart of everybody ultimately.
Now that we are wrapping up, there are more questions. Anyway, last two questions.
Last of the last questions. As the church increases its presence in the digital world, can we see the numbers of mass goers dwindling?
I mean, I think, no, I don't think so. I think it is very clear. I mean, mass numbers may dwindle, but it won't be because of social media, I think. I think also maybe what we're learning, though, is that in our celebrations of Eucharist and in our way of celebrating, we need to remember that liturgy is at its best when it tells stories, when it has music, it has movement, it has colour. And that what we maybe need to rediscover in our liturgy is the richness of our tradition, because we have people who are not used to just coming in and sitting down and watching and listening. They want to be engaged. So we find ways of engaging them in the preparation of the liturgy, in helping with the preparation of the themes, of the music, and social media can help in this. So I don't think it's either or. For me, it's social media as a beginning point of contact in which we draw people into a greater participation. One example I heard recently was a priest, for his homily, had said to people the week before, here is next week's gospel. I want you to send me by social media your questions about next week's gospel. And then in his homily, he reacts to the questions of the people. So sometimes it's about being more imaginative, but realizing that human beings have a need for the community, for the closeness of celebration. We had a meeting in Rome 2 years ago for bloggers from all over the world, Catholic bloggers. And these are people who are usually in their bedroom or in their study on their own, working away. And when they were very much geeks, they liked their social media. But when they came together, even though it was not a liturgical celebration, it was the richness of you're that person, and that when we bring ourselves together as community to celebrate Eucharist, we celebrate the fact that what we have in common is it's Christ who calls us, and that it is Christ who makes us a church, and that it is his good news we want to share with one another and with others in our world. So I think the more we engage with social media, the more we realize we have the need for that nourishing of our faith through the encounter of Christ in Eucharist.
So I would like again to invite everyone to join us on November 23, 24 in Colegio de San Juan de Latran for our Catholic Social Media Summit version 2.0. Of course, with our keynote speaker, Monsignor Paul Tighe. Thank you, Monsignor, for granting us this opportunity. And we would like to announce, because we, in solidarity with the typhoon victims, one generous sponsor would like to sponsor all participants who will be coming from those stricken areas. So marami kasing hindi makakapunta because of what happened to them. So right now, one very generous sponsor just told us, okay, for those who came from Tacloban, from Samar, from Leyte, we'll be sponsoring all their registration fee for this upcoming summit. So praise God, thank you so much, and please tell all your friends who are there to be with us. So we hope to see you there. Thank you.
I think one of the great things we should do with social media is to show people what is happening. We need to show in social media where the church is active in serving the poor, where the church is active in teaching, where the church is active also in hospitals and in healthcare, so that rather than simply talking about it, we actually show the people what is happening and show them that, okay, everything is not perfect, everything is not easy, but the church is trying, particularly at the local level, to be a support and a help to people and show that. And social media allows us to show that. So that's a key thing for me. The other thing is I think we need to also is when things happen to show our solidarity, our sense of sympathy and support for people, that we are with them, we are encouraging them with them. On the social action, on social justice, one tweet of the Pope when he said, if a stone falls off the Colosseum, all the world talks about it. But if a person falls off a building scaffolding, nobody talks about it. And that tweet got huge attention because people said, yes, we need to be attentive to the dignity and worth of every human person. I think in the social media at this moment, the first thing is it's not about us. It's not about showing off what we're doing. It's primarily about how can we be more effectively engaged. But I think where it's important, one is social media does allow, and this is important, the people to speak for themselves. It allows them to tell their stories and to allow people to have that possibility. And then also use social media to let the whole world know what you are doing. Because at this time, everybody in the world knows about the Philippines. Everybody is concerned about the Philippines. They feel powerless and helpless to know what they can do. Show them what you are doing, and maybe they can support you and help you. I don't really know what's happening here, and I wouldn't. But what I know, in situations where people are cross and angry, and rightly so. I mean, people are so upset for what is happening that it's easy to stand here and be calm and be peaceful. But I think in a moment of difficulty, a great service we can have is not to deepen the division, but to try and create a climate of trust and faith where we work together. Now, that's not easy, but it means even if I have to say something is wrong, I do it in language that builds up and supports rather than simply condemns. So I can think of, if I see somebody is doing something wrong, I should say, that is wrong. Not say you are a bad person or start giving out about you. Because maybe sometimes somebody does something believing it is the right thing, but it is mistaken. And if we just condemn them, they get caught in their mistake. So what we have to do is try and, by being gentle, by being constructive, create space for them to say, yeah, maybe there's another way, more constructive, yeah. Always speak the truth in love, with the emphasis on love.